December 26, 1996. A chilling 911 call shattered the peace of Boulder, Colorado. In a quiet, affluent neighborhood, the Ramsey family woke to a nightmare. 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey, a child beauty queen with a bright future, was reported missing by her mother, Patsy. Hours later, her lifeless body was discovered in the basement of her family home. What happened that night has haunted the nation for decades. JonBenét's death wasn't just a tragedy. It became a national obsession. This case has everything: mystery, heartbreak, and controversy. And yet, 27 years later, we're still asking the same questions. Who killed JonBenét and why? This is the story of a little girl whose life was stolen, a family thrown into the harsh glare of suspicion, and a justice system that may have failed her. Today, we dive into the timeline, the evidence, and the lingering questions surrounding this chilling case. Who is JonBenét Ramsey? And why has her story captivated millions around the world? Stay with us as we uncover the details of a crime that continues to baffle investigators and intrigue the public. This is the story of JonBenét Ramsey, her life, her tragic death, and to find out how justice was served. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey wasn't just another little girl. She was a star. Born on August 6, 1990, to John and Patsy Ramsey, JonBenét quickly became the apple of her family's eye. With her sparkling blue eyes, golden curls, and infectious smile, she lit up every room she entered. From a young age, JonBenét displayed a love for performing. Her mother, Patsy, a former pageant queen herself, introduced her to the world of beauty pageants. JonBenét thrived, winning titles like Little Miss Colorado and National Tiny Miss Beauty. To her family, she was more than just a beauty queen. She was a playful, curious little girl who loved Christmas, her pet cat, and dressing up for the camera. Her father, John, was a successful businessman, and the Ramseys lived in a luxurious home in Boulder, Colorado. To outsiders, their life seemed perfect, a picture of wealth, beauty, and happiness. But as we often learn in true crime stories, appearances can be deceiving. On Christmas Day of 1996, the Ramseys celebrated as a family. They attended a party, exchanged gifts, and cherished the holiday season. It was supposed to be a joyous time, but it would end in the most tragic and unimaginable way. Little did anyone know that JonBenét's vibrant life was about to be cut short, and her family would become the focus of one of America's most notorious unsolved cases. The morning after Christmas should have been filled with leftover cookies, unwrapped presents, and the joy of a holiday well spent. But for the Ramsey family, it was the start of a nightmare. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey called 911, her voice frantic. She reported that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was missing. A ransom note had been found on the staircase, demanding $118,000 for her safe return. The note warned against contacting the police, but Patsy's instincts told her she needed help. When police arrived, they found the note, 2.5 pages long, written in an oddly theatrical tone. It demanded a very specific sum, matching John Ramsey's recent work bonus. Officers conducted a cursory search of the house, but found no signs of forced entry. Despite the supposed kidnapping, the crime scene wasn't secured. Friends and family were allowed to enter the home, potentially contaminating critical evidence. For hours, everyone assumed JonBenét had been taken by a stranger. But at around 1 p.m., John Ramsey made a horrifying discovery in the basement. JonBenét's body was found, her mouth taped shut, her wrists bound, and a garrote fashioned from a paintbrush handle around her neck. The sight left investigators and family members reeling. The question now wasn't just where JonBenét was, but who could have done this and why? The ransom note found in the Ramsey home was unlike anything investigators had seen before. At 2.5 pages long, it was unusually lengthy for a ransom demand. Most notes are concise, focused solely on the demands of the kidnapper. This one, however, read more like a script. The note began with an odd salutation, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, and claimed to be from a small foreign faction. It demanded $118,000, precisely the amount of John Ramsey's recent work bonus, raising immediate suspicions. Investigators wondered, how could a stranger know such a specific detail? The tone of the note was theatrical, warning the Ramseys not to contact the police and threatening harm to JonBenét if they didn't comply. It even instructed John to withdraw the ransom in specific denominations of bills. Yet there were inconsistencies. The writer called JonBenét their daughter, even though a stranger would likely say your daughter. Forensic experts analyzed the handwriting, concluding that it was written in the home, likely with a pen and pad belonging to the Ramseys. This raised even more questions. Why would an intruder take the time to compose such an elaborate note inside the house? The ransom note remains one of the most perplexing pieces of evidence in this case. Was it a genuine demand for money or a carefully staged diversion? As we unravel the events, this question remains central to the mystery of JonBenét's tragic death. The initial response to JonBenét's disappearance was chaotic. The Boulder Police Department, inexperienced in handling a potential high-profile case, made critical mistakes. When officers arrived at the Ramsey home, they failed to treat it as a potential crime scene. Friends and neighbors were allowed to enter the house to comfort the family, unknowingly contaminating evidence. Key areas of the home, including the basement where JonBenet was later found, weren't thoroughly searched until hours after the 911 call. One of the most significant blunders occurred when John Ramsey, accompanied by a friend, discovered JonBenet's body in the basement. He carried her upstairs, placing her on the floor near the Christmas tree. While understandable from a grieving father's perspective, this act further disturbed the scene. Police failed to secure critical pieces of evidence. The broken basement window, which some believed was the intruder's point of entry, wasn't properly examined until days later. Investigators also overlooked key details, such as a suitcase positioned beneath the window, which some theorized could have been used in an escape plan. These early missteps would haunt the investigation. As time passed, the compromised crime scene made it increasingly difficult to piece together what had happened that fateful night. It also fueled a storm of speculation and suspicion that would soon engulf the Ramsey family. In the weeks following JonBenet's death, the Ramsey family found themselves at the center of a media firestorm. Initial sympathy quickly turned into suspicion, with many pointing fingers at the grieving parents. John and Patsy Ramsey's public appearances were dissected by both the media and the public. Some felt their demeanor was too composed, too rehearsed. Critics questioned why the couple had hired high-profile lawyers and a public relations team so quickly. To many, it seemed like an act of guilt rather than grief. Theories about the family's involvement began to circulate. Some speculated that JonBenet's death was the result of a tragic accident, covered up to protect someone in the household. Others suggested darker motives, pointing to Patsy's history in pageants and the pressures JonBenet may have faced. Adding fuel to the fire was the lack of evidence pointing to an intruder. There were no signs of forced entry, and the ransom note raised suspicions about its authenticity. Investigators couldn't ignore the possibility that the crime had been committed by someone inside the house. Despite their public pleas for the killer to be found, the Ramseys remained under an unofficial cloud of suspicion for years. The question lingered: were they grieving parents seeking justice, or were they hiding a dark secret? As years passed, advancements in DNA technology brought new hope to the investigation. In 2008, forensic experts analyzed evidence collected from JonBenet's clothing. They discovered traces of DNA that didn't match any member of the Ramsey family. This breakthrough seemed to exonerate John, Patsy, and JonBenet's older brother, Burke. It shifted the focus back to the theory of an intruder, someone who had managed to enter the house, commit the crime, and leave without a trace. But even this discovery came with complications. The DNA sample was incomplete, providing only a partial profile. It wasn't enough to identify a specific individual, and questions arose about whether the DNA had been contaminated during the investigation. Despite the challenges, this evidence was a turning point. For many, it validated the Ramseys' claims of innocence. However, it also deepened the mystery. If the Ramseys didn't commit the crime, then who did? The discovery of unknown DNA reignited interest in the case, but it also underscored the frustrations of the investigation. Every step forward seemed to lead to more questions than answers. The search for JonBenet's killer was far from over, and the pursuit of justice would continue to haunt everyone involved. While the investigation continued to dominate headlines, the Ramsey family endured personal struggles of their own. Patsy Ramsey, who had survived ovarian cancer once before, faced a recurrence of the disease in 2002. For Patsy, the loss of her daughter was a pain that never faded. Despite the accusations and public scrutiny, she remained steadfast in her belief that an intruder was responsible for JonBenet's death. She spent years defending her family's innocence, participating in interviews, and urging the public to help find the real killer. In June 2006, Patsy passed away after a long and courageous battle with cancer. She went to her grave without knowing who was responsible for her daughter's murder. Her death marked a poignant moment in the case, as it shifted focus once again. Would her passing lead to new revelations, or would the truth remain buried with her? For years, Burke Ramsey avoided the public eye. As a child, he was shielded from the media frenzy surrounding his sister's death. But in 2016, nearly 2 decades after the crime, Burke decided to speak publicly for the first time in an interview with Dr. Phil. The interview sparked mixed reactions. Burke's demeanor was described by some as unusual, with critics claiming he appeared detached or nervous. However, he maintained his innocence and expressed frustration over the ongoing accusations against his family. Burke's account offered little in the way of new evidence, but it reignited public interest in the case. His decision to come forward was seen as a step toward reclaiming his narrative, yet it also reopened old wounds. The question remained, what really happened to JonBenét that fateful night? One of the most persistent theories in JonBenét's case is that of an intruder. Advocates of this theory point to the broken basement window and the unidentified DNA found on JonBenét's clothing as key evidence. Some investigators believe the killer may have entered through the basement window, leaving behind minimal traces. The suitcase found beneath the window was theorized to have been part of the intruder's escape plan, though this remains speculative. Others point to the unusual marks on JonBenét's body, which some experts believe could have been caused by a stun gun, a device not typically linked to familial violence. These details fuel the idea that someone outside the Ramsey household committed the crime. Despite these arguments, critics of the intruder theory highlight the lack of clear evidence. No footprints were found in the snow outside the home, and many believe the crime scene was staged to mislead investigators. Could the truth lie somewhere between these competing narratives? The murder of JonBenét Ramsey was one of the first cases to become a full-blown media spectacle in the age of 24-hour news. From the moment the story broke, it captured the public's imagination, fueled by the tragic loss of a child, the wealthy and glamorous family, and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the crime. The media coverage was relentless, with tabloids publishing sensationalist headlines and talk shows speculating about the case. The Ramseys became household names, but not in the way they would have wanted. This media frenzy had consequences. Investigative leads were leaked, public opinion was swayed, and the focus on the case became more about entertainment than justice. It also created an environment where theories and accusations spread like wildfire, often with little regard for the truth. Could the intense media attention have hindered the investigation? Or was it the reason the case stayed in the public consciousness for so long? The impact of the media remains a contentious issue in this unsolved mystery. In the years following JonBenét's death, the Ramsey family became embroiled in numerous legal battles. As public suspicion mounted, they faced accusations from both the media and private individuals. One of the most notable lawsuits involved a defamation case brought by the Ramseys against a tabloid that had implicated Burke in the murder. The family argued that the baseless allegations had caused irreparable harm to their reputation. These legal battles underscored the lasting impact of the case on the Ramseys' lives. While they were never charged with any crime, they lived under a shadow of doubt that few could escape. The lawsuits became a way for the family to fight back, but they also kept them firmly in the public eye. For the Ramseys, justice wasn't just about finding JonBenét's killer. It was also about clearing their own names. Yet, with every victory in court, the larger question remained unanswered. Who was truly responsible for JonBenét's death? As technology evolved, so too did the tools available to investigators. In recent years, breakthroughs in forensic science have opened new doors in the quest for justice. One of the most promising developments has been the use of genetic genealogy to identify unknown suspects. By cross-referencing DNA evidence with public genealogy databases, investigators have solved numerous cold cases. Could this technique finally bring answers to the Ramsey case? Despite these advancements, the DNA evidence in JonBenét's case remains controversial. Some experts believe it holds the key to identifying her killer, while others argue it may have been contaminated or unrelated to the crime. As science continues to progress, hope remains that one day the mystery will be solved. Until then, the case of JonBenét Ramsey serves as both a cautionary tale and a beacon of hope for the power of forensic innovation. Over the decades, the case of JonBenét Ramsey has become a topic of endless speculation and debate. True crime enthusiasts, online sleuths, and seasoned investigators alike have pored over the details, hoping to uncover the truth. Some believe the family's wealth and influence played a role in stalling the investigation, while others argue that law enforcement's missteps in the early days doomed the case from the start. Theories range from the plausible to the bizarre, everything from jealous pageant rivals to shadowy conspiracies. The internet age has only fueled this fire. Forums dedicated to the case dissect every piece of evidence, while podcasts and documentaries keep the story alive in the public imagination. But for every theory shared, there's a family still grieving, desperate for closure. The endless speculation underscores one thing. JonBenét's story isn't just a cold case. It's a cultural phenomenon, a mirror reflecting our collective fascination with crime, justice, and the human capacity for both good and evil. The ransom note found at the Ramsey home remains one of the most perplexing pieces of evidence in this case. Written on the family's stationery, the note demanded $118,000, a curious figure matching John Ramsey's recent work bonus. The note was unusually long, filled with dramatic phrases like foreign faction and don't try to grow a brain. Experts have debated its origins for years. Handwriting analysts couldn't conclusively link it to any family member, but they couldn't rule them out either. The note's tone and content raised eyebrows. Why would a kidnapper take the time to write such an elaborate letter? And why leave it behind if the crime wasn't truly a kidnapping? For some, the ransom note is the key to solving the case. For others, it's a red herring, a staged element designed to mislead investigators. Its mystery endures, leaving more questions than answers in its wake. Despite years of investigation, no one has ever been charged with JonBenét's murder. The cloud of suspicion that once loomed over the Ramsey family has lifted for many, but doubts linger in the minds of others. For law enforcement, the inability to solve this case is a glaring failure. Leads have dried up, evidence has been re-examined, and suspects have come and gone. Each time, the trail grows colder. For the public, the lack of resolution is maddening. How could a child be killed in her own home, in such a wealthy neighborhood, with no one brought to justice? The unanswered questions keep the case alive, a haunting reminder of the fragility of justice. The shadow of doubt is all-encompassing. It hangs over the case, the investigators, and the family, leaving everyone involved to wonder, will the truth ever come to light? JonBenét Ramsey's case is more than a tragedy. It's a cornerstone of modern true crime culture. Since her death, the case has inspired countless books, documentaries, and discussions, shaping how we view unsolved mysteries. The case has taught us about the importance of preserving evidence, the dangers of media sensationalism, and the complexities of justice. It has also highlighted the darker side of human nature, the voyeurism, the rush to judgment, and the endless fascination with tragedy. True crime aficionados continue to revisit the case, drawn by its layers of mystery and the hope that one day it will be solved. But at the heart of this story is a 6-year-old girl who lost her life too soon. JonBenét's story reminds us that behind every headline is a human being, a victim whose voice can no longer be heard. In the years since JonBenét's murder, DNA testing has advanced dramatically. Investigators now have tools that were unimaginable in 1996. Genetic genealogy has cracked decades-old cold cases, offering new hope for justice. Could this technology solve JonBenét's case? The DNA found at the scene has been reanalyzed multiple times, with results that both illuminate and confuse. While it points to an unknown male, it hasn't yet provided a definitive match. Investigators remain optimistic. With each passing year, the possibility of a breakthrough grows. For the Ramsey family, DNA holds the promise of closure, a chance to finally uncover the truth behind their daughter's death. The advancements in science remind us that no case is truly unsolvable. But will it be enough to bring justice for JonBenét? Only time will tell. 27 years later, JonBenét Ramsey's case remains one of the most infamous unsolved murders in history. The unanswered questions are as haunting as ever. Who wrote the ransom note? Why was JonBenét's body left in the house? Each theory raises more questions than answers. The public's desire for closure is matched only by the families. For John Ramsey and Burke, the hope of finding JonBenét's killer is what keeps them going. As we reflect on this case, we are reminded that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about truth, accountability, and healing. For JonBenét, for her family, and for a world still captivated by her story, the search for justice continues. JonBenét Ramsey's life was short, but her legacy endures. She has become a symbol of innocence lost, a reminder of the fragility of life. Her story has sparked conversations about child safety, media ethics, and the power of forensic science. It has inspired countless people to seek justice, not just for JonBenét, but for all victims of violence. As the years pass, one thing remains clear. JonBenét will never be forgotten. Her story continues to touch hearts and minds, a testament to the enduring power of hope. For her family, for the investigators, and for the countless people who still care, the search for the truth goes on. And in that search lies the promise of justice, a justice that JonBenét deserves and that we all strive to find.